What's up, guys? How you doing? Today we have a very special guest for you today. It's a man that makes comic books come alive. I know, mind-blowing. I didn't know this existed until I walked up at Comic-Con, came to his desk, and I was like, damn, this man just made this book here. So I want to introduce you to Damien Tomaselli. This is a man that is a transmedia creator. He studied at UJ, his affiliation with VAD, and this man is making wonders as a local artist, and you just have to see his work to believe it. And I couldn't believe it. I mean, he took this and put it in front of me, and I walked through the comic book. So without further ado, Damien, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Regan. Happy to be here. Do I call you Regan or GhettoSmurf?
Either way is fine. GhettoSmurf is good. Regan is fine. It's not a problem at all, man. Just happy to have you here, and it's a real honor to have you here. Like I was saying in the introduction, it's just I couldn't believe what I saw. I walked up to your desk and I literally thought I thought you were like advertising a game. I was like, okay, so this is a new game, maybe a game dev that's creating a game locally. And then you said, no, it's a comic book. I'm like, okay, cool. So have a look at it. And it's like, but let me show you this. And then you brought this thing to life, and I was like, what? Wait, how did you do this? Is this some black magic voodoo? No, it's just, this is some new stuff that I had never seen before, and I was absolutely gobsmacked. I was literally mind blown. I was telling everybody that walked past me in Comic-Con saying, have you checked this stall out? The guy that makes comic books come alive. Have you? You need to go have a look.
Thanks, man. Appreciate that.
That's only a pleasure, man. So I just wanted to just quickly go through. Can you just introduce us a little bit and just tell us who you are, and just so the audience knows who Damien Tomaselli is, and just a little bit of Q&As about yourself.
Yeah, sure. This bio thing is always like the hard question because,
yeah,
but yeah, I guess I'm a researcher, postdoctoral researcher in the Center of Visual Identities and Design at University of Johannesburg, and I did my PhD thesis in let's just call it story space. So what I call the temporal index, and basically I look at the space-time continuum of different stories. And so these will change depending on every single story that you're looking at. And anyways, I just become kind of interested with spatial computing, things like augmented reality, virtual reality. And I come from a background of storytelling, originated in drama, and then got into film and lighting and et cetera. And so is that enough?
So just a quick one. So in the drama, was this like in acting itself?
Yeah. So when I don't know how much detail to go into. You might have to just kind of cut me off because I tend to ramble. So that's a ramble.
I'm the same. Yeah, I'm a rambler myself.
A little graphic if you want to ramble. Carry on.
Skip to the next timestamp.
Yeah, maybe. I won't be offended because I know I do that. But so I started at UKZN University. Although it was such a long time ago, it was actually called University of Natal, Durban. And I had I was doing undergrad, and I didn't know what I wanted to do, but I didn't want to walk around with a backpack in Europe. I just wanted to start getting the ball rolling. And I took all of these courses, and I had no idea which one I was going to fall into. And I actually had a full load, and I knocked one of the courses off, and I took drama. And I thought, it's just a first-year subject. And then what happened was that the connection with story got me, and I started focusing on drama. But what we did, drama and performance, it was the name of the course, but really focusing on acting, directing, and script writing, which to me are all different sides of the same coin. So some sort of three-sided coin that we would link to. And I say that because a lot of people, when they hear drama and performance, they only really relate to the acting part of it. But the whole thing is basically drama, storytelling, etc. So I think that was the seed that started it off. And and everything else that I'm doing, like even with the comic books itself, I still see the performance of it because
Yes,
it's all storytelling. So
agreed. And
yeah, so
and I
that
think
was
storytelling is important. I mean, without storytelling in today's society, where would we be? It's a very broad question, but it gets you thinking. Without stories, we wouldn't know about the past. We wouldn't know, wouldn't have the creative like instinct as a child. Say, you have an imaginary friend because you heard it from stories, and that's what got that spark to say, okay, cool. I want to tell a story of my own one day, and everyone does. Everyone wants their story told, if whatever it may be, if good or bad. Everyone wants that story told. So I think, as I said, like storytelling is just a baseline in life, and it's so important. And I think a lot of people want to be heard in that sense, regardless of whatever manner it may be. But a lot of us miss we miss the train for that one. But but I think that's the cool thing that I like. When I was going through this, and we spoke before, was that's why I wanted to ask you about the drama, because a lot of people just overlook, and like you said, they overlook. Okay, you're an actor. That's it. It's just bass actor or whatever, a stage performer. A lot of people forget that there's so much involved into that field. From, like you said, you have to do lighting. You got to know stage makeup and all the stuff that goes into it. There's a lot that's involved in it. So, as I said, it's pretty cool. I just wanted to just touch bases on that as well. So,
yeah, absolutely. That's like, I mean, sorry, but
no.
that's you hit the nail on the head because it's all different forms of theater. Even though it's a comic book, it's a form of theater. And what you were saying about storytelling, Joseph Campbell, I think, kind of summed that up where he said, "Why stories? Because the soul's way of communicating is to teach." And that's basically what I think.
That's deep. I love it.
And yeah, I mean, like one of the pet peeves, if you want to irritate someone who's an actor or who's studying acting or studying drama, if you really want to irritate them, go up to them after they've done a play or something like this and say, "Man, that was killer. I can't believe you remembered all those words." And you'll see their face because they'll be like, "You think that's the hard part, is remembering the words?" That would be like telling a singer, "Wow, you're such a great singer. I can't believe how well you sang that song. How did you remember all the words?" Like the singer will say, like, "Really? That's what makes it?"
Yeah, hectic. I love it. Okay, cool. So you wrote this comic. This was, like, I was going to show it there so everyone can see it again. I wanted to quickly ask you, could you just give us this, in short even, just a brief description of, or tell us about your comic for the children of, I know I've heard different pronunciations. Is Xaphan? That's how I've been saying it. Am I correct? Children of Xaphan?
I think it comes from Latin. So
as
far as I understand, it's Xaphan. It's pronounced
Xaphan.
Xaphan.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So Xaphan. So can you give us a brief on the Children of Xaphan and what it's all about, and then also if you can just touch a little bit on what makes this comic different to your generic comic, well, that we see at, I would say we used to see it at cafes, but I don't know about you see it at cafes now. You can only go to the comic book stores, but at a comic book store, for example.
Okay, so the first question is what is it about? So it's kind of a take on on the war in Genesis. It's like it's an origin story, basically.
Yeah.
But it's an alternative take on the origin story. So the idea is that it could exist as a story that could have been told in Genesis, but Genesis is made up from various scripts and collections.
Yes.
But not everything made it into the Bible, so it's feasible to assume that there are stories that could have been included in Genesis but were left out of Genesis for whatever reason.
Yes,
so
yes.
That's kind of the large idea, is that these are stories that are maybe hidden within space and time that relate to the idea of origin. And so the original idea from it is that combined with a picture that I saw on DeviantArt, where I would just kind of like zone out at night and listen to music and just scroll through Deviant. This was way back in like 2000, the early 2000s, you know. And I saw this one sketch that just had an angel dragging a sword, and it was like looking into the mountains beyond. And I remember the title said something along the lines of The Lost Angel. And I thought, there's a story there. And so that kind of was the seed of what would become Children of Xaphan. So this series here is actually the origin story of it. The first stuff that I wrote was meant to be like an ensemble type of deal, where there was, there were 40 characters, and there was an arc of like 24 issues, and it just became too big to pull off. Yeah. So to this day, I have bits and pieces of those scenes developed, but it just became too expensive, too difficult to coordinate. So I went back to basics, and I thought, well, maybe I should focus on, instead of such a big ensemble, just focus on the origin story itself, which is actually why I use myself in the comic, because I can rely on myself to, you know, rock up on time and get all the shots done. So it's a bit of a smaller, there's a smaller number of characters, but it kind of sets the scene for the rest of the series. And this series here basically focuses on the angel. The first one is the angel Dominic, who is the angel of judgment. And it takes place, the first issue sets up the rest of the series and introduces the idea of a war in heaven where descent started and Lucifer rebelled and et cetera, et cetera. And so there's a lot of issues there, because Dominic is the angel of judgment, and the angels themselves are not seeing eye to eye, and he's now torn between making judgment and following through with all of this chaos that's going on. And in the interim, I mean, I'm kind of giving away ideas for to come, but in the interim, the problem becomes in that he starts to understand humans and humanity. And so the angels are kind of at least in the canon of my story, they kind of stand for what they represent. So Dominic represents judgment. Layla is the angel of childbirth. But these are very much ideologies that they follow through with. And so the series deals with following through ideology, but through the lens of being human. And the fact that it's not that easy to follow through the ideal, because you have to deal with life and all of these things that come through with it. So that's not a short summary. I already kind of messed that question up. But somewhere within there would be where it's at. So the second question is, what makes it different? I don't know how much this is up there in hierarchy in terms of how I think about it, because the most important thing to me is that I'm telling a story. But if I'm juxtaposing it to other comics, I think one of the big things is just how it's illustrated. Because I can't draw. I've never been able to draw, and
don't worry, me too.
When you're drawing,
my stickmen look skew.
Stickmen are like not that easy to draw, because you have to draw them straight, and I can't draw them straight. So
no, I actually had I was teaching this one child once, and I was drawing stickmen just to represent something, and this 5-year-old kid laughed at me and said, "You can't even draw stickmen. That's embarrassing." He even went to run and tell his father, like, "Look at this guy's stickmen. This is terrible." I was so insulted, but I also laughed at myself. I was like, well, that clearly isn't my talent, so I'll leave it to the experts.
Yeah, that's quite bad. That's a bad one. That's
right.
I've been laughed at, but at least by adults, you know.
So, well, thanks. It makes me feel even better now.
I kind of know how you feel, because I do storyboards, but now remember, I can't draw or sketch or anything. So I do storyboards with stickmen, right? And when I show these to people, they laugh at me. And sometimes my storyboards are so bad, they're so bad, that I'm on set and I'm looking at the storyboard trying to remember what I had in my head, because I don't even know what I drew. And then I get it eventually, but it can take like a really long time, you know, and everyone's like looking at you like, what is this guy doing? He's making this up, he's going along. So, so I can't draw, but I can. When I got into filmmaking, we did a lot of work with lighting and things along those lines. And then I got into photography, Photoshop, and I thought, well, this can be done. And so the way that it's illustrated is really, I think, quite unique, because I haven't seen personally another comic that's illustrating using photo manipulation. And that was one of the original ideas that I thought would be great, because going back to when I would scroll through DeviantArt, I mean, it was a really exciting time because, you know, the internet was kind of still relatively new and it was still finding its feet, and you had a lot of creativity come out of that. And one of the sub genres in DeviantArt was photo manipulation, and I was kind of blown away by these images because they look so hyper realistic. You know, you could see that these are real people, these are real objects, but at the same time it didn't look real at all. It looked like a kind of I don't know, hyper stylized version of reality, and I thought that was pretty amazing. And I didn't think I'd ever be able to do any of that, but I thought, if you could do that, this is where it gets dangerous. But what if?
Yeah.
I was like,
it's always the what if, yeah.
Yeah, that's a dangerous question. What if this could be done, and what if you could illustrate a comic using this? It would be epic. So I started asking around, like, why has no one done this? And eventually they came back and said, because it's just a lot of work and it wouldn't be worth it. So I started doing it, and I was like, man, this is a lot of work. No. But anyways, I've done at least one issue of it. But like what you were saying earlier, when you thought it was like a video game, that was a very common response, is what is this thing? And you seem to understand that it was a comic when I told you it was a comic. But some of the guys, I would tell them it's a comic, and they'd still look at me bug-eyed, like, well, how is it a comic? And I was like, well, yeah, here's a text box, there's a story. Like, it was kind of a bit of a barrier to get by. It doesn't look like a comic. I think maybe with all the other stuff with AR and everything else that I had, it also didn't really help to classify it in the minds of people, at least immediately, that it was a comic. So I think that maybe sets it apart. And the art style, like, I had a lot of feedback on the art style. Like, someone actually said it looks like that. They asked me if I shot with miniatures, and so that was an interesting question, because I looked and I thought, okay, I can actually see what they're saying, because, you know, miniatures, they look real, but when you get close to them, they kind of don't look real. And I think it ties back to that nature of photo manipulation and hyper-realism, where it's real, but it's not quite real. And then, like, I mean, some people even made connotations to, which I was very happy about, because they made connotations to, like, Louis Rowe and Julie Bell and Boris Bagello. Yeah. And, you know, those guys aren't always associated with the comic book style. So it's kind of like a hybrid mesh of a few different ways of bringing comics together. And so that's probably one of the things that sets it apart. In terms of creating, this is a hot topic. I'm scared to say this because I've had this conversation with a few friends of mine, and it's a contentious issue right now, the use of artificial intelligence. For the most part, I use stock. So everything that I use is I'd say 97% of it is probably from photographs, either stock photography or photography that I've taken myself. So real elements that have been blended together. But sometimes it's difficult to find the exact stock at the right angle that you're looking for. And towards the end of creating this, some of the AI things like Midjourney and DALL-E 2 and all of that, Stable Diffusion, they started to come online, and I got early access to DALL-E 2, and I thought, let me maybe use this to generate stock. And so some of the stock that I've used is generated through artificial intelligence, and maybe even more prominently my supervisor, who's working in a similar field, Nathaniel Stern, he told me about this other AI thing called pseudo-write, and that's basically style generation. So you write something,
Okay.
and then you tell it what you want it to sound like, and it'll feed it back to you. And a lot of this stuff is just really off base, but it becomes like a useful sounding board, because you type it, it throws something back. You often kind of it's hit and miss, and you miss a lot, but sometimes it gives you like a good idea. And so that I use that a lot to try and make it sound like it was a bit more biblical in the way, in the style that it was written, so that could kind of hold the scripture. So I don't think too many other comics have used that process either.
I think, just quickly touching back before we go to the next one, I just wanted to, I think when you said that a lot of people couldn't identify it was a comic book, even though you had shown them, I did like the difference I had noticed with your style is it doesn't follow that traditional block style. It's unique, it's different, and I love that. I'm one of those people. I love outside of the box. I hate normality. I absolutely detest normality. And yes, sometimes you if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Or why reinvent the wheel? But sometimes, and this is one of the cases. This is why it blew me away. But once you had shown me that it was a comic book, I clicked and I was like, this is just a unique way of expressing the same idea as a comic book, just in your own manner that you've personally crafted. And that's what I loved about it so much, and that's why we had to get you on the show, and why I needed to show more people this, is because it's just so unique in its own way, regardless of the you bringing it to life. It's a unique take on a comic book, and that is unique to you. And I think a lot of people also generally stick to the very basics, because that's the way to do it, if that makes sense. We're not, why must we try to do something different? But I think that's also what separates a lot of people in the end, is difference is success, in my opinion. I find difference to be success. I think sticking to the normal generic ways is just going to lead to a mundane, boring it sounds horrible, but that's just my take on it. And I think a lot of people, like when you had mentioned, it's like they didn't fully understand it, because you're so used to that block by block, that the story follows this block to this block. And when I went home and read the comic, I was like, it's so different. I loved it, and it was just, like I said, I loved the take on it. Was so different and unique in its own way, but it still had that feel of a comic book in the end. And it's not like I don't know, you wrote, just pasted a couple things here and there that just doesn't make sense. It follows the structure of a comic book, but just it look and feel is so different.
Yeah, well, you hit a hot button now. There's so much. I mean, we could have a 3-hour chat on this subject alone, because what you're saying, I know exactly what you're saying, and I've experienced this from the early days. I mean, even going back to theater, I did I brought in a projector in my honors play, and the questions that we had after, because we'd have a review afterwards, and then one of the first questions they said is, why did you bring in a projector? And my first thought was, why are you asking me that question? Like, it was kind of self-explanatory, I thought, if you were there, why I used it. But I think the reason that they asked the question is, and this is like linked to what you're saying, is that you just don't do that. You just don't bring foreign objects into theater. And I thought, well, who cares? Like my first instinct is to say, who cares? The point is about manipulating the audience, telling a story. So why wouldn't I do it? It's going to help me achieve my end goal. But in time, because I keep doing this, no matter what, if I'm working in film or if I'm working whatever, I keep gravitating towards here just naturally. And so I have a lot of experience with the stuff that you're talking about. And I kind of find there's this split, right? There's this like traditionalists, and then there's this. I don't know what this is. This is a different area. It's kind of like going into a path that is not. It's off the beaten path, right? And a lot
Yeah.
of people are doing what you're saying. They're like, but this is the pathway. That's the way you go. And I say, that's the pathway, and that's great, but that's not the only way to do it. We can do it other ways as well. Because what is it?
Exactly.
What's the point that you're doing? So I don't know if I should bring this up, but I guess I'm going to bring it up. If you look back if you look back in art and you look back in history, you won't see that much reference to the color blue, right? So even if you go back like all the way to Homer's Odyssey, he talks about mercury-colored water, something along wine-colored water, something along these lines.
Okay.
And so blue is kind of sparse, right, in its mention. So some people started asking a question, well, did they even see blue? Did they recognize blue? The question is, if no one had explained to you when you were younger what blue was, would you understand what blue was?
No.
And, well, I mean, it's inconceivable to say no, but then again, is it really? Because there's been like studies done with the Himba tribe in Namibia, and this has been done and replicated in other contexts, but the Himba tribe does not recognize blue. They just don't see it, and biologically there's nothing wrong with what they're seeing. They just don't have a word for it in their language.
Wow.
And they tend not to recognize it. So that's fascinating. We could speak for ages about it, but this is constantly the problem that we come up with, is how you think about something. And it goes back to what we were actually talking about earlier with story, where you said something along the lines of story is the basis of how we understand and interact with the world. And like, I think socialization is largely that. It's a story, it's a learning process. It's psychology says the first 7 years is where you really your worldview is kind of cemented. And because we're adults, we have the problem of our brain is less plastic, and we're less open to new ideas, and it's more difficult for us to see if we become more rigid. Whereas kids are very creative because they haven't had their worldview solidified yet. Apparently, if you learn a new language as an adult, that increases the plasticity of the brain, because it forces you to break the patterns that you just have now learned and taken for granted. So anyways, that's maybe going into a lot of depth. But when it comes to storytelling, I find the same thing. Every time we go into augmented reality, virtual reality, I mean, even in film, when we went from analog to digital, like I do color timing in film, so we do a lot of post-color. And the wars that we have with traditional filmmaking processes, it's always this issue. And I know that this is also a very common thing in the tech world, is just teaching people what things are. And it was about 2013, 2014, I hooked up with a company in Berkeley called Madefire, and they were taking comics, and I thought that stuff was just incredible. And I saw a comic called Mono, and it was a comic book, but it was a comic book in digital that was designed to use digital as an enhancement tool, because the big problem with putting comics into digital is that it's not a book anymore. And so all those spatial relations are completely negated, and it just doesn't work very well. So these two guys, Ben Wolstenholme and Liam Sharp, they realized that we should re-engineer the story space to kind of make it work. And I said to them basically what you said to me now, where you said, like, it kind of makes the book come alive, and it's a comic, but it's also not a comic, but you can feel it. So that's all very validating to me. But my response is like, the guys who want traditional, they're going to want traditional. But there's always going to be that contingent of guys like yourself who see this other, this other thing in it, this other space in it, this other way to engage with story. And my dad was actually with me on the Sunday. I was manning the booth on my own the whole week, and he came on the Sunday, and he made an observation where he said, Damien, the guys who are showing interest in your book very few of them are actually dressed up in cosplay. And so I think the guys who were dressed up in cosplay were fans of traditional stories and traditional storytelling.
Yes.
And I've noticed that, like, it's kind of ironic because even though it's a comic book, most of the interest is coming from people who are not necessarily, I don't know if they brand themselves as comic fanatics. They're probably comic fans, but they're more like guys like you, guys who are interested in gaming, guys who are interested in design. There's something else that's going on that they're seeing. So, like, I spoke with some of the comic guys there, and they were giving me advice on what to do, but everything that they're saying is trying to turn it into a traditional comic. And all the feedback that I'm getting from people who responded well to the comic like it because it's not being traditional, and they're seeing that there's something else going on. So anyways, I'm going to shut up because I could go on about that. But that's validating to hear that from you.
No, that's, like I said, it's like, I do, like, you made that point where you said that a lot of people that were trying to make it traditional, like you said, were dressed up in cosplay. And it is, like, there's nothing wrong with that. Like, if you love traditional style of art or whatever it may be, there's nothing wrong with it. But like you said, I think it was interesting that your dad actually observed that. Like, look, don't get me wrong, I'm not like this, like a comic book fanatic, if you want to call it that. I do like them. I enjoy reading them. I don't own like millions of them. I was more brought up into the world of the gaming industry and the comic industry through gaming. I'm talking back like Age of Empires 1, Crash Bandicoot. That's where it all came from. And World of Warcraft, Warcraft 3. That was actually what really sparked my interest in gaming, was Warcraft 3. But obviously you were in that industry, you're still learning about all the things that come along with it, and there's so many different niches within the gaming, like you said. There's cosplay, there's artists, all of that, and there's nothing wrong with the traditional way of doing things, like, don't get me wrong. But like, it was a very cool observation, like that you just pointed out, your dad pointed out. And it wasn't, how do you say, your traditional comic book person, if you want to call it that, like dressed up in cosplay and all of that. So that's very cool. So kudos to your dad for pointing that out, because that's actually a really cool observation, to be honest. Wow.
No, I was just saying I didn't make that connection either. I noticed that there was a difference in the kind of person that was there, but I didn't know how to brand them because they were also so different. So that was one kind of commonality that you can see with all of them.
Yeah.
But I mean, the traditional guys, I'm not knocking them either.
No.
But the thing is like, you know, there is already, I think Neil Gaiman is great. I think Liam Sharp is great, but there is already a Neil Gaiman and a Liam Sharp. I can't be Neil Gaiman or Liam Sharp, but I can be Damien Tomaselli, you know?
Yeah. No, exactly. And I think that's what a lot of people do miss, is uniqueness sells. People think it's like it's taboo to be unique in your own way. It's really not. People are always looking for unique, and that's funny enough. Like, people think it's taboo. If you want to do something, you're like, let me not do it this way because it's too different. Be unique, because funny enough, people are looking for unique. I'm one of those people. I'm always looking for something different. I'm not going to go and, I don't know, buy a big pen, if it makes sense. No offense to big pens if they watch this. I'm going to look for something different.
You're not getting a big pen sponsorship.
Oh, damn it. But it is that. But it's just that people look for unique. And funny enough, people don't realize that tons of people are looking for it. And it's just, people are too scared to take that leap, if it makes sense. So, but like, again, we could talk about this specific topic and to get into, like, really dig into the psychology of it for many years. We'd still be on the same podcast.
There's a theorist called William Ogburn who wrote about this, and he wrote about this under the idea of cultural lag. And it's basically what you're saying. It's the idea that there's this resistance to change, but at the same time, change is inevitable. So
Yes.
it talks about that process of adjustment to maladjustment. Because when you think back on things, it's funny like how the lens of history looks at something, and they're like, I mean, for example, if you look at Einstein, we consider him a genius. But if you go back and look at Einstein when he came out with his theory, it was so different and so unique. They slammed it. So
Yeah.
apparently there was a book that called 100 Authors Against Einstein, and the story goes when he responded to it, he said, if I were wrong, one would have been enough. But yeah, anyway,
It's true.
as you say, you can speak about this for ages.
Forever, yeah. So I want to quickly just briefly, and you can just a quick one on this one. I just want to say, how long did it take you to roughly to develop the Children of Xaphan?
Yeah, that's a tricky one to answer because I've been working on it on and off for so very long that in the back of my mind, the original time, the first time I started working was about 2010. I started making notes for it. And then I did it, came back. But since I've worked with VAD, I've had the opportunity to be able to try and consolidate focus of my work. And even in VAD, I'm doing a whole bunch of different things. So I've been doing it on and off. But I'd say if you crashed everything together, probably took about 6 months.
Okay. But that would be like if you had to cram everything in, like, okay, sure.
Yeah, if I had to do it like every day back, but I need to get, going forward, I can't take 6 months to get a comic out. I need to, it's what you were actually saying earlier in the very beginning, I think before you started recording, about how difficult it is to do everything on your own. You have to kind of be smart about it. So that's where I am as well. I need to figure that out.
Yeah, collaboration is key. Like, there was a pity I didn't push that record button, but because there was a good conversation. But it is collaboration is key, and man, like you say, if you had the manpower behind you or a team, it would be like you say, 6 months would be crushed down to maybe 3 months a comic, or 2 months possibly. Because I can just imagine, like, when you told me about this, when we spoke about it before today, I did a little bit of research and I started looking at all this stuff, because I remember you had mentioned to me at Comic Con, like how how the process is, which I'm going to ask you about that now quickly in a very like simple format, how you explained it to me, because I was a bit of a dummy to this. I didn't know exactly what was going on. I just saw black magic coming out of a comic book. But I just looked at like the process involved in it just looks so tiring. Like everything, it's this meticulous details that need to go in, and like I've been watching some of the videos on Instagram that you've been posting, and like the process of putting like I saw just to put wings on a person was putting it off, putting it doing this, like these weird things. Like I'm not a Photoshop guy, but like swapping this and cutting this and editing this, then putting it back there. Then it was in a blue thing, then it was in a green thing, then it was back there, and eventually this whole process. And like I thought to myself, holy shit. I don't think I had the patience to do that. And you pulled it off and you did an entire comic. So I can just imagine, like, if you had a team behind you, how much that process would just be like cut down to. But on that note, though, can you just give like a brief, it doesn't have to be like in depth and in detail, just a brief description of like the process you go through, like, well, if you had to, like, say, let's just say we had to cram it now into like those let's say not say 6 months, let's say a month to make a comic. Could you tell me, like, just briefly describe the process that is involved in making these comics?
Yeah, so it's kind of similar to a film process. The first thing I do is I have to come up with an idea, bounce that around until I have an idea that I'm happy with, and then from there I storyboard it with my stick man. And then I have to cast it, which is kind of different to I think what a lot of comics do, because casting is a whole nother process on its own. Traditional guys can just have an idea, draw it. I have to go through the casting process, and every time you go through this process, you have to reshape everything. Like I might have to go and change the storyboard, etc., etc. Then I have to shoot the images. Get photos of them, Then I've got to go through the photos, figure out which ones I'm going to work with. Once I have those, I put those into Photoshop. Finding stock is worth mentioning because it can take hours to find the right stock if you're working with stock. So that can be time consuming. Develop the images and then put them in through layout. And during this stage, you might want to kind of rework a few things, but it's tricky because you may have to develop new stuff, which you don't always have time for doing. And so that's pretty much what I did. And then the very last stage that I did with this series here was to then take those layers and work with them in augmented reality. And then I guess I should probably mention there's also the printing and marketing and all of that. So
that's another ball ache.
Yeah.
Cool.
So yeah, there's a lot of stuff.
If you now, like you said, well, if you've had the first issue out now, okay, what is next for the Children of Xaphan? Will the story continue with him, or in the next comic that you would like to release? And do you know possibly roughly, or I won't say give us a release date, just is it in the works?
Yeah, well, it is in the works. I'm very early at organizing the workflow. But the story is, I've got a draft of the entire series. So I kind of know story-wise what I'm doing. I do have a lot of images which I've already taken for this. And I've had to also just work around things like trying to get into physique condition to shoot it. So I've actually shot a lot of that stuff already because I knew when I was in condition I wasn't going to stay in that condition.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of stuff I still have to pick up and shoot, and I've still got to even cast other people, etc., etc. So I'm hoping to have that done. Look, ASAP. I don't want to give a date on it because, as you say, like I'll be held to it.
No, of course.
It's very important to me to get it out there. The idea of the first issue was to pass the ball over to the second issue. So in some ways, the first issue is setting up the rest of the series, but in some ways, it's quite different to the rest of the comics to come because they're going to be more kind of character based. This was largely setting up the idea of it. So it won't be complete departure. It'll have a similar look and feel. But we're going to start to meet some of the main characters who are going to carry us through the first season, get a bit more up close and personal with them.
Okay, cool. That's cool. I like that. Like you said, like the idea that it's the first issue is basically setting up the stage, and even though like the next ones will be character driven, it will still keep that same story basis in the end. No, that's cool. I like things like that. There's nothing worse than something that's completely different. If it makes sense in the terms of you got this one story, unless it like the story ends there, it completely ends there. It's imagine having Spider-Man 1 and then all of a sudden it jumps to Spider-Man 14 and you missed 2 to 13. So I like that you'll keep that concept through from the first one. So another question I wanted to ask was, your work is so unique, okay? Do you feel that your work could possibly give way or give assistance to newer people that are looking to join in the same idea of comic books? Do you think that the Children of Xaphan could possibly give them a spark, or even just not even the comics, just like what you do with these comics, like pave a way to assist them into getting into more, spark that interest into getting into this field of comic books or even just work in general?
I don't know. I've been so focused on just finishing it that I never actually stopped to think about something that far beyond in terms of how it's received. I mean, I would certainly hope so. That would be amazing because that would mean that it actually had an effect on someone.
Yeah,
so,
that was good.
Which is important to me personally. And if they do that, then it kind of it shows that it was successful and it showed that it connected. But I mean, I hope so. The fact that people have responded positively to it I think is proof that there is an interest. There is an interest there. So,
Yeah.
Comic-Con was very validating for me because it showed that this can actually work on a financial level.
Yes.
If I get my ducks in order, I think that it's feasible and that there's a connection there. I think as long as there's a connection there, it's worth being explored. And so if other people are seeing that, then there's nothing stopping them from
Agreed.
doing something similar, which would be, fantastic.
Awesome. And now I'm going to ask you this, but there's one, you can't say load shedding, okay? What is one issue that you faced during this process of making the Children of Xaphan? What was Xaphan? Sorry. What was one of the what are the challenges that was? I wouldn't say that was always constantly happening, or just a general challenge that, besides also, okay, let's say that obviously the time frame being an issue because it's such a great amount of work that needs to be done by you alone, but just any other issues that you faced besides load shedding, because you're not alone there.
Yeah, I think one that a lot of people don't think about just because of the nature of what I'm doing is the fact that I'm working with actual actors. That's difficult because if you're drawing or if you're animating, effectively the animator is the actor as well.
Yeah.
So they can draw on their own self to put their performance into the illustration. I'm working in a collaborative process doing that because there's an extra actor who I have to work with. So that relationship is important, really, because that's really, in a sense, it's not all that different to theater or to film, because you're working with somebody else who's now taking on the character. And when you work with these characters in your head for so long, you get they become real to you.
Yes.
And I always find it jarring, not bad jarring, but I find it jarring when all of that shifts to an actual person who's now the character's on their shoulders. It's kind of like, I know this character so well, but at the same time, I've never met this character before. So there's a chemistry that needs to be worked out in that. And I think what's very easy to overlook is that it is acting. It is very much acting. I know this because I'm on the other side trying to compose the story. And I've noticed people who have some sort of performance background. The better you are at performing, the better it's going to translate for me when I'm working on it. So there's so much I can do. I can nail the lighting. I can make the lighting better. I can do whatever, composition, whatever. It all falls flat because it all hinges on the actor. All right. If that moment just doesn't connect for whatever reason, if that intimacy isn't there, it just doesn't carry as well.
Yeah.
So, because of the nature of what I was doing, and it's very physique based, I had a bit of this idea of well, how well am I looking? Am I defined? I mean, I had guys who were water loading and, water shedding and trying to cut their body fat down to 3% on the day. And I'm trying to tell them this stuff is not as important. It's not as important as you think it is. No one cares to the extent that you think that they do. I'm going to go through this whole thing in Photoshop and make it look better than it really is anyways. So what I really need is for you to connect in the moment. And it's tricky. It's not easy acting because you have in theater and film, you'll have, you have continuous motion. And in that time, the performance comes out in that what I would call temporal index. In comics, it comes down to one shot. So all of that whole storytelling, everything that's been carried in that moment comes down to literally one frame, and it's kind of a tricky thing to nail,
Yeah, no, definitely. I can when you put it that way, I can actually see how that can be a challenge. Okay, interesting, very cool, but also not cool at the same time. If you're on the opposite end, there for you. So now let's just broaden this a little bit. Now so we've spoken about the challenges you faced in your comic, okay? What challenges do you, in your own words, this is a broad question, what challenge do you think that local artists in South Africa are facing in this industry, living in South Africa currently? And it could be it could be professional cosplayers, could be artists, it could be game devs, anything involved into the gaming industry. What do you think that, in your own words, some challenges are? And how can we overcome them, or small solutions to them?
Yeah. So, I mean, earlier you spoke about when you went around Comic-Con and you saw there's a lot of talent. And eventually on the Sunday, like when my dad came to the booth, I got to walk around as well and meet some of the local guys. And it's the same thing every time, like theater, film, comic game. Like South Africa is actually, we have a lot of talent in this country. So I think one of the problems is that the talent doesn't always have the ability to. There's a problem with the market, okay? Because the market is relatively small in South Africa, and if the market doesn't support the creatives, then the creatives can't flourish. So you have this, the creative potential is this much. How much of that gets supported is maybe this much, right?
Yeah.
And we also have this, I don't know if I want to call it a problem, but film is dominated by Hollywood, right? So we consume a lot of foreign media. Comics, when people say comics, I don't know if they mean comics because what they really mean is superhero stuff. And superhero stuff is, the superhero market is really just cornered by Marvel, DC, and Image. And that's it, and when people buy these things, that's what they're worried about. And I've been to Comic-Con here, I've been to Comic-Con in San Diego. The most common question that I get is, was so-and-so at Comic-Con? And I was like, well, I don't know if so-and-so was at Comic-Con. I know a lot of people go there. It's not really my major concern, but that's where the market is at. So I think the big problem is, how do you change that? How do you get people to realize that there's a lot of talent here? So I think there's a bit of an identity question going on there. Like I always talk about something like rugby, because if you look at rugby, South Africans are crazy about rugby, and they keep winning World Cups. But it proves that it can be done. It proves that the talent is here. But if you look at rugby, it's like a cultural edifice. So kids learn it when they're young. They're supported when they're young. They understand the game. Rugby is like one of these things that people who don't play rugby will still go and watch a rugby game. They don't even know the rules. They don't care. They support it.
Just wouldn't scoop the ball.
Yeah. So like if comics and gaming can get the same level of appreciation, respect, maybe the answer to that is like start teaching comics in school. Take it a bit more seriously, because I don't know, my experience with school was a long time ago for me, but I don't think anybody would have taken comics very seriously. So I'd say that would be a big one. This American thing. Like again, I'm a fan myself of classic films and big name comics, but it's kind of also starting to irritate me. Like if you look at Marvel, what Marvel have realized is people relate to their own culture, their own identity. So what they're doing is that it's like this mass cultural appropriation, but it's filtered through Disney. We have to go through Disney in order to respect our own cultures. So, we'll go and we'll pay all this money for Black Panther. See, Marvel have figured this out. You've got now, I think there's a Muslim Miss Marvel, and it's like, I don't want to knock these things, but it's also kind of like, why are we paying them for them to tell us who we are? We should be selling our stories to them, not the other way around. And considering that there's talent here, it just seems like there's a bit of a mismatch going on.
Yeah. And to just put a little addition to that, like you look at, if we just use Black Panther as an example, that was a huge hit. Look, it was a fantastic movie. But again, if we had to take now, like let's take that into retrospect of South Africa. People are making movies about us or our country. We have movies about Nelson Mandela, all of this. And again, it's who's making them?
Right.
And who's getting all the credit for it? And why aren't we doing it? And I look at movies like what was that? The one about the prawns. District 9.
Right.
There was a fantastic movie made in South Africa by South Africans, and it got an Oscars. Or some big award. I'm pretty sure. I think it was the Oscars. That director got it, and that's just proof in the pudding. That why are we not doing more of that? And regardless of whatever industry it may be, but especially like I look at when I was at Comic-Con, I see so much talent, and I look at. I think it was 2019. We had a cosplayer. I think her name is Jinx. She went and won Worlds in cosplay. Now only the people that actually follow her know that.
Right.
Why? Like this chick won Comic-Con. She went to Worlds. She placed first. She won. She killed it. If you've ever seen something like her work, it's unreal. This chick is crazy good, and like I would love to get on. So if Jinx, if you're watching, we'd love to have you on the show. But this chick is crazy good, but we don't. Like, I'm not saying I'm not saying that people need to be constantly celebrated in the sense of like let's think that like they're Angelina Jolie or Brad Pitt, whatever they may be, but it's just we don't. I think what I have come to know, especially in like we spoke about this before the podcast, is everyone's out for themselves, and when we see someone succeed, and I've noticed this a lot in South Africa, and I don't know if it's a mindset that is taught. But as soon as you see someone succeed, you kind of have to try to bash them down, instead of just absolutely saying, you know what, you've earned that, well done, and celebrate their victory. And I feel that I'm rambling now. It's my turn to ramble. Skip to the timestamp, but it falls part and parcel to what we're saying is we don't have. The industry is growing in South Africa. The communities are growing, and I've seen a substantial amount of growth, and we'll get to that now because that's my next question. But I've seen a substantial growth in this industry just in South Africa alone. But I still feel like it's not, like you said, the creative is here and the support is here, and the amounts of money that. If we look at this from a financial standpoint, or in terms of like the government, let's think of the government. Why isn't there? Again, I'm also a creator myself, as we spoke. I was a professional dancing teacher and choreographer. So, and I look at that industry itself as there's no support. Zip. It's out your own pocket. That is it. There's nothing for you, unfortunately, in this country. You have to take everything out your pocket. Whereas you look at countries like Russia and all these other countries, or the States, most of the European countries, they take money out and set it aside that this is for this sector here, so that we can make sure that they flourish. And I'm not saying like tons of money needs to be poured into gaming, but I think there does need to be just a support. And it starts, like you said, teaching kids comic books, or even just really encouraging kids to use their creativity in school, because you know that you taught maths, accounting, science, and that's basically like there's art. Art is down there. Or it's an extracurricular activity. It's not like do it because and I think most artsy or creative industries, it's always going to be, well, unless things change, and like I wish it would, because I don't think people see enough value in it, but there's so much value in it. I don't think, like parents, you say, hey mom, I want to become an artist, or hey mom, I want to become a professional actor. Generally, this is, okay, I'm not saying it's an assumption, I'm just generalizing, but let's say 8 out of 10 parents are going to be like, please get your shit together, go be a doctor, or go make money being an accountant, or do something like that, so that follow the normal way of doing it. And then you look and you listen to some of their success stories. Their parents did the same thing, and they were just like, screw that, I'm still going to do it regardless. And look at the success they come, and then people sit back and be like, oh damn, actually, And I feel like that ties part and parcel. It's the creative industry, whether it be in any other form of creative or in the gaming industry. I mean, I tried the esports scene, trying to go into the esports. I don't think if I told my mother when I was like say 13, 14 years old, hey mom, I want to become a professional Dota 2 player or whatever, she would look at me and slap me like into another blood group, and we're like, get your shit together. Like, I got an Italian mother. My mom would slap the bejeebers out of me. It's like, get your shit together. You can't be a professional Dota 2 player. What money are you going to make? But then you take it like 10 years later, you look at what these kids are earning now overseas. I mean, they're like, I think what was a couple of years ago, there's a team that won this big Dota 2 competition. Once like 16 mil. And not ranks. Yeah. It's so I think it's a thing that needs to change. I personally think it's a mindset. Okay. Well, I was going to ask you, the Tomaselli, that's a Tomaselli.
And under story, like when I was doing my MA was about print to digital comic books and the remediation thereof. And I had that idea, and I also had another idea about digital migration, and which has proved pretty much the way that it's gone since 2010. Everything's gone digital. And my dad, he wrote to me in an email and he said, you know what, I think you need to do your original idea on digital migration because comic books are already just a hobby. And
that's the word. So that's the word, hobby.
That's the word, hobby. Yeah, exactly. So then after like working with Madefire and getting the comics done and developing that whole stretch, and now it's been recognized by University of Johannesburg. I remind him all the time. I'm like, Dad, you remember that you told me that it's just a hobby? And
so it's not a real job; it's a hobby.
He just denies it. He just denies that he said it. And I said, I have the email where I probably deleted the email, but I tell him, I have the email where you said that, and he just, no, wasn't me. I didn't say it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I agree.
No, it happens. Yeah. Okay, so just briefly, I would like to know, like, do you think that the market in South Africa is growing, and then, I'm like, again, it's just the industry of the gaming, comics, cosplay, the whole industry as a whole.
Yeah, my best guess is yes. My best guess is that it's growing. I mean, I don't know. I haven't conducted a survey or a study on this, but just based on, like, I mean, if you look at Comic-Con itself, it's getting bigger, I think.
Yes.
They now moved to Johannesburg Convention Center. I've been to the big one in San Diego, and while it's a lot bigger, it's like if you had to compress the San Diego one, it felt like that. It felt like a legitimate Comic-Con.
Yeah.
And down here in Durban, we don't have anything. We got like the school hall with, a couple like people that you probably wouldn't let into your house on Sunday hanging around. So I'll probably be friends with all of them, but like it's not big, you know.
Yeah.
So I see it growing, and I've also seen. I mean, I know at San Diego Comic-Con that unless you have been there the year before, if you've been there the year before, you can go back the next year. But if you're coming in out of the dark, you have to enter a lottery to get into the convention because it's going to be a capacity. Sure. They only have 120,000 tickets, and you still can't get in. So like that speaks volumes. And there's actually I think it's a football or a baseball arena which is in walking distance from the center. And I think there are more people who go to Comic-Con than the capacity for that entire
Sure.
sports arena. So now you have geek culture, which has shown that it can rival mainstream sports, right? And it's like, I don't know where these people come from, because when you go to the supermarket, I don't see them. When you go to the bank, I don't see them. But when you go to like Comic-Con, they come out of the woodwork. So they're there somewhere. And
it's time.
It's time. We're coming out. And I know I was in conversation with a company in Dubai. They're based in the UAE. They're called Pop C, and they're doing the same sort of thing in the UAE, and they're bringing geek culture effectively there. So they're doing esports. They're doing Comic-Con. So it's like, it just seems kind of like a no-brainer, you know.
Yeah,
it's
definitely.
growing. And I think maybe when you consider all this hype about metaverse, etc., in 10 years it might be quite standard that it's kind of accepted, because it's becoming increasingly mainstream. I mean, you look at the rise of superhero films, and it's taken over. I mean, if if you had told me 15 years ago superhero films would have been the thing,
That's big, yeah.
I don't know what I would have said, but it shows that there is an interest there.
Yeah,
People
I mean,
like
if you
to
look
be
at
kids.
if I'm not mistaken, I'm not too sure if it was China or if it was Japan. They've got esports schools now. Like, it's literally taught at school. You get taught to be an esports star, and like, it's I'm not gonna, like, I stand under correction. I don't think it's compulsory or anything like that. I don't know if it's like a separate college, or I know there's universities that teach that in those, and I'm sure there's other countries that do the same thing. But that's like they pumping so much money and investing so much time into this industry. And like I said, just with the esports schools, they're teaching kids how to be a professional, I don't know, Fortnite player or PUBG player. I mean, who thought, if you, like I said, just even take 10 years ago, 10 and 12, no one thought this would be possible. No one thought.
Yeah, I didn't think about it because I think as you know, when you come from gaming, when you come from comics, you're so used to adults and so many other people telling you what you were saying earlier, like, what is this? Why are you wasting your time with this sort of stuff? And I always thought, like, it's kind of ironic because the skill that it takes to master a game is not nothing, you know? And it's like, why is it that if you play chess and you're really good at chess, you get respect and it's legitimate? But when you're really good at a video game, which takes hours and hours and hours and hours to develop that that capacity to be able to do that, it's kind of looked down upon. So
that one here, I love that quote. I love that one. That was a nice one. We're gonna actually, yeah, with the chess, like you said, like, if you're a fantastic chess player, you celebrate it. But okay, nowadays, look back, let's say back then, but nowadays it's these, I would say, like, your world class esports stars. They obviously celebrated, and I think their parents love them because their parents are reaping the rewards from the amounts of money these kids are making. But in the end, it was, like you said, you were celebrated to be a fantastic chess player, and you had to study. Well, not say study, but you had to practice to be good at chess. You were going to pick up the queen and be like choo one time, and you've beaten the world's ranked #1 chess player. So you actually had to practice. And I think the same applied to gaming, like you said there. Why are you wasting your time and your life on this, where it actually does? Look, this is not Tetris or something like that. Like, but we're just taking from this perspective of, I don't know, like to say the Counter-Strike or something like that. Those oaks, I've even seen some of the training schools, these professional Counter-Strike players, they do like this hand-eye coordination tests that they must do them. That is crazy. The amount of hours and dedication they put into it. Like, I guarantee you, I'm not even going to say like 10, maybe even 5 years ago, people wouldn't celebrate them as much as they are now, because this, like you said, this geek culture is just growing rapidly around the world.
Yeah, I mean, it's incredible, like, how good some of these guys are. You can't really believe it when you see what they do when you've played the thing. But you reminded me, when I was younger, I was sent to a whole bunch of like psychologists and all these like special things that I didn't know. You just do what your parents tell you. It was only later as an adult I was like, why did I have to go see all of these people? And I had a lot of problems as a kid, and one of these problems that I had was apparently hand-eye coordination, because I wasn't holding my pencil properly and I wasn't right. I was just doing my own thing. And I remember going to all of these different specialists, and they'd make me do all these different exercises. I didn't know why. And then later on, my mother told me it was because of this issue. And she said, but in 1990, I went over to the States for a year. My dad was working there, and so the family went over, and they had this thing called Nintendo. And this friend of mine, he had a Nintendo. So he became my best friend just automatically
because
within a couple minutes. And we would just sit there and play Super Mario Brothers. And my mother's like, that just cured all your hand-eye coordination issues. Just sorted them out.
And that's the crazy thing. Like, I read a study about, and I actually wrote an article about it recently on the website, about obviously the benefits and the downfalls of game, like long-term gaming, and one of the benefits is hand-eye coordination. I mean, and muscle memory, and a lot of people, I think, nowadays people are starting to realize that there are benefits to it where before there weren't. But like you said, I mean, if you look at, for example, I don't know, I'm just gonna say Counter-Strike, for example, or one of these shooting games. Those hand-eye coordinations, or even the chicks. I've seen some chicks do. Geez, like I can't even know what her name is, but this chick runs drills for hand-eye coordination, and she is able to. She looks at she sees this black dot running across the screen, and she goes, okay. She looks at opens a map and says, "I'm over here. He's the end of the map. So if I left my gun up like this, and boom, dead, headshots." And I was like, what? And she just, like, people run past and just choop 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 choop, and you don't. There's no. It's just a flick of the wrist and the eyes, just choop boop, dead. I was like, what? And so there are benefits to it. I think like nowadays people are starting to realize that there are, whereas before there weren't. So we have 2 more questions for you. The second one, or the penultimate one, is: do you have any advice you would give anybody new or youngsters getting into this field that you're in terms of like this, whether it be comic books or, like I like to say, making comic books come alive?
Well, I think the drawing on what we were just talking about, the fact is, it's not that easy a profession to do. Before you started recording, you were also saying about the difficulties of being able to do your own thing, and where do you find the time? Where do you find the energy? How do you keep it creative? You have to take into account that you're starting from nothing. You've got to build an audience. It's really hard, is the short version of it. And not only is it hard, it's not that glamorous.
No.
For a lot of the time, it's like sitting in a dark room on your own when you'd really rather be doing something else. And you don't always know where your next meal is coming from. It's very humbling, I find. You know, I don't know what everybody's experience is, but it's like I've done a lot of couch surfing. I've done a lot of friends are like buying expensive cars. I'm like, I don't need the expensive car, but I need to survive because I want to do this. And in a way, it's like it becomes a curse. It kind of owns you.
Yeah.
So if you don't get joy out of it, if you don't get meaning out of it, then it's probably not for you, because it's not even a case in sometimes of the path less followed. It's the case of there is no path. You have to hack your own path.
Yeah.
And I think it's very easy to overlook how difficult that is. So the passion has to be there, because your resolve is going to be tested. And, you know, we're all, us creatives, it's this kind of weird thing, because we take rejection so much to heart. At the same time, it's like this path is riddled with rejection.
Yep.
So you kind of have to build up an immunity, like the mongoose to the cobra.
You have to have a thick skin to be in any creative, I think.
You've got to know how to be destroyed, go for a nap, wake up, and just carry on.
Pretty much.
So I think that's the thing. But I also think that, you know, like when I started this whole thing, I had gone to get a real job after studying, because I didn't have the business acumen to be able to make theater work. If I could change one thing in my life, it could very possibly be that I should have just gone and tried to figure it out. And if I went broke, I went broke, because I would have learned the landscape. But, you know, it got to a stage where I couldn't sleep because I had this anxiety little demon kicking me. And I woke up at like 3 a.m. I was like, I just need to start writing. Like, that was the first time I started working on Xaphan. I was like, it doesn't even need to be good. I just need to get some of this out of me, so that I know I'm nurturing the creative side. Because when you are there, it's difficult. It feels like you're living a lie. You know, it feels like you're marrying the wrong thing. Or
yeah, pretty much. I think, like you said, like it's just, you just need to do it. You need to get it out there. So even if you failed, you know, at least I did it, regardless of the outcome.
Yeah. At least I took my shot. Because I think that's another thing we all do, is like, I'm not that good. We're not really good enough. You see some stuff that's out there and it's so good that you get so excited, but you also think, I'll never fly. You know, my stuff will never be appreciated, and why should it be? Because everything else is so very good. But as you say, it's like you need to just, what are you gonna do? You know?
Yeah, I mean,
and you'd be surprised sometimes. You pleasantly like I am with you. Like when you see it, when you say everything you're saying, I'm like, wow, I can't believe that. If you told me, 15 years ago that someone would have a podcast with you where they would say all these kind things about your work, jeez, man, it can't be that bad. You know?
No, of course. And like I said, that I was mind blown, and like, I commend you again, 100%. Like your work is incredible, and I'd never seen, and still have never seen anything like it, and that's why. And especially what I love also about it is it's a local artist. It's an essay-based artist. It's not like no, obviously no disrespect to any international artists, but it's always great and
that's fine.
Heartwarming.
It's disrespectful.
It's heartwarming.
South Africa.
Yes. Woo.
Ring it.
This no one's braai. But I think it's just refreshing to see work like that come from SA, and because like you said, we said earlier in the podcast, was that we're so used to that all the good stuff comes from Hollywood or wherever it may be, and just see work like yours and that it is locally based is like, it's really refreshing. And like I said, it needs to be, people need to hear more about it and see the actual product for themselves, and I guarantee you they'll be on the same wavelength as me, saying wow shit.
Well, thank you, Regan. That's extremely humbling.
No, it's only a pleasure, man. So before we end the show, I have one last question for you. So I just need to know, what is to date your favorite game that you've played, and the one that you spent the most hours on? The real nerd question of the day.
You saved the hard one for last, eh?
And
Out of all the children you've ever had, which one is your favorite?
Games are like children. That's actually it's a good one there. It is a tough one.
I feel like whatever I say, I'm throwing the rest under the bus. You know.
It's very true.
So just one, as in one.
You could give a few. You can give us, let's just say, your top 3.
Oh, okay. I think. All right. Well, I'll mention. All right. There's more than 3, but I'll choose 3. I'll mention, even though everybody is playing this game, and it doesn't really need a shout out, I'll give it a shout out anyways. The Last of Us, because I think that it was monumental in how this whole discussion of ludonarrative dissonance and how it integrated story and gameplay. I've never seen it done that fluently. It's always been story is here and gameplay is here, and they've kind of always like pulled apart to some extent. Like, I mean, how many games have you played where if the character dies, you cry? You know, you don't generally.
Yep,
it
I know a game.
Elicit.
But it's very far from few. But there are games, or you get to that there's like that crossroads, and then you sit there. I know I'm a Blizzard junkie. World of Warcraft. You can even see. You can't see. I've got the pictures of the back of Blizzard.
Yeah, I can see it.
I got a picture of Sylvanas back there. Like, there's one of the expansions where like I was very concerned that they might just kill her off, and I was like, if you kill his character off, I will stop playing this game. I swear to God, do not kill her. That's a character. It's a character. Like, there are characters in games that you absolutely like, you resonate with, and you like, some characters you see yourself in. Some of them you just like, you love their arc so much that it becomes so personal for you. And it's like the same as in movies, like you draw or series, like I don't know, Game of Thrones. Like, people, you become so invested into a character, and if it just gets killed off, shit, I'm gonna cry. I will have some man tears there. I have no shame.
Well, yeah, maybe it's just because I haven't played enough Warcraft, but I don't know. I never really experienced anything that was that drew me into the story that much. I would remember playing that game and thinking, okay, I'm going to go to bed just after this this little thing gets done, and
Yeah.
it wouldn't give me a chance to go to bed because it would just leave things on cliffhangers, and
Yeah.
yeah, I lost a lot of sleep that week. But I drew. So I've given a nod there. They can take that one. Number two, I think I'm going to throw one to a local game because it's local. Foot Fighter.
Oh,
And,
yeah.
yeah. So that was a fun game, and I think they kind of, if you're South African, you'll see that game a bit differently to maybe the rest of the world. 'Cause
The Saints and Boots.
you just, like everyone knows those guys. You know,
Yeah.
you've met these guys before somewhere, and so I think like they did that really well. And then I think number one, which is always going to stay number one, will be Super Mario Brothers 3. That for me was the first game I ever really played, and to this day I've never really felt, I don't know, that's a magical game for me. It's a magical world. It was just so incredibly fun but creative, and it just took imagination and showed like what you can do with it. And so that brings me back to my childhood. That was awesome.
I think I think games like that, like I had mentioned earlier, I really got into the gaming world. Like I'd played games, like I said, I loved Age of Empires. I still do love the Age of Empires trilogy or series, or all of them. And like StarCraft and most of like the Blizzard games. But what really gripped me was Warcraft 3, the strategy game, and that's actually where I met, like I said, like my all-time favorite characters is a character Sylvanas Windrunner from World of Warcraft. But you meet this character in Warcraft 3, and I was like, this is a cool ass character. And then you just this personal like relationship with the character. I know it sounds very weird, but you build this relationship with this character, and then and not even just with the character, with the game. And I mean, like I spent hours and hours and hours in that game. And then when they moved to World of Warcraft, took me a little bit longer to get there because like dial-up internet, all of that there was crap expensive. So when internet became cheaper, and like I was earning a few bucks in high school, I was like, okay, well now I can go play World of Warcraft, and that just became like, again, it's that from my, I wouldn't say childhood, but it is a big part of it. But it's one of those games, like you said, Super Mario Brothers. It's there. You have this deep connection with it, regardless. And it could be childhood, it could be just a game that you picked up yesterday that you just connect with. And I mean, I'm just trying to think, what's another game like it's very Skyrim or God of War, like games like this. You see how people get so invested into it. I mean, I've been reading a couple articles now in like these Facebook groups about, I think it's Dark Souls. And like people just bitch and moan like this game is so crap hard. How did someone make this game? But these people are so invested and love it so much, and like they'll be like, this game is the shittest hard game. I hate this game so much, but it's my favorite game. And that you just have this love-hate relationship. And I guess it's now I'm rambling, but it's so awesome to see. It's awesome, but to see like how people can connect so much to creativity, and this is what it's all about. It's someone had this idea, let's create, I don't know, Zeus, and put him here in front of you. You run around with the Zeus and go lightning bolt people, and that people fall in love with that creativity in the end of it, and people become so personally invested into that idea that you made, and that's, like I said, like and that is all the story that you're trying to tell, because again, we said everything is based off the story, and it's just so I love it. I love seeing people, like, I love nerd talks. You can go to a bar or a barbecue if you're an international listener. You can go to a bar and then someone will say something, and out of the blue, like, have you checked this new FIFA game or whatever? And then you check, or like again, they'll hop out the woodworks. All these people, like these nerds, just popping out the like, oh yeah, damn, I love this game. And then people become like the best of friends from a game. It's the strangest thing, but the coolest thing to see. I met one of my best friends through gaming as well. I had never seen him. He lived on the other side of the world, And funny enough, we became the best of friends, and then all of a sudden I started meeting him at conventions, and then to this day we're still friends. And he's still, like, I only see him every now and then, but to this day he's still one of my best friends. It's the craziest thing. And I met him through Heroes of the Storm from Blizzard, a MOBA. It's the craziest thing.
But it kind of makes sense, because it's like, I mean, think about it. It's like a game is kind of like entering someone else's, or any creative work. It's like entering someone else's imagination, and it's like you say, it's a very personal, it's a very personal, special connection, you know.
Yeah.
So, I mean, Carl Jung would speak about the internal world and the external world, and he was very clear that the internal world is real. People say it's not real because it's not tangible, but in his mind it was a very real place, and you're sharing that intimacy with a group of people.
Yeah.
So I guess if you haven't done it, you probably think this is all nonsense, but if you experience it, it kind of does make some sort of sense.
Yeah, 100%. Well, man, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the show, and I really hope we can actually make a plan to have you again sometime soon. And obviously we'll be keeping in touch. We'll be keeping in touch soon. But yeah, man, it's an absolute pleasure. And again, I love the work, and I'm gonna be pushing this, and we need to get this out to more people, because it's absolutely amazing. And it's, again, like we said, you're a local artist, and we need to get support for local artists. So people, please support local artists, whether it be an artist, a designer, a game developer, whatever it may be. I know next week we will be having a local game developer for a game called Population Zero. It's a survival first-person shooter role player. It's like a bit of a mixture game called Population Zero, based in Cape Town, and it's basically like a post-apocalyptic game that's it's based around, but all based in Cape Town. Like, Cape Town is the last place on Earth where I think it was some disease touched. So it's going to be very interesting to have the dev of that game coming on to next week's show. So again, like we said, support local artists, because if we don't support them, who's going to support them? So, Damien, thank you again. It's been an absolute pleasure. But before you run, just where can we get hold of you, like your socials? Can you drop us on Instagram? I will link them into the description, but if like people watching this, where can they find you?
I'm so bad at this stuff. I don't know my own Instagram. I think it's got my name in it, and then it's got the word art in it. It's like Damien.Tomaselli, my name, DAMIN.Tomaselli _art /.
Okay.
I'm on Twitter, but I never use it. It's all hail Desmodus. And I feel like I have some other ones, but I don't even know what they are. I'm on Discord and I'm on Twitch. I can't remember what those handles are.
Okay. No, well, you send them through to me. I'll drop them in the description down below and send all of that. And yeah, I'll send you I'll send you a Discord link so we can also have a chat and keep in touch. But it was, again, an absolute pleasure, and I'd love to have you again sometime soon. And we'll be keeping an eye on you and all that you're doing, so that we can keep track. I know we will be posting the blog post next week, so that'll be coming out soon, the full podcast, and we'll be dropping up little segments of this for TikTok and Instagram. So keep an eye on that, and it's going to be a banger. You guys are going to love the work. Go and get yourself one of these and watch the world come alive. Thanks again, man. Have a good one.
Cheers. Thanks, Ed.